Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more From the Depths. Now, I've done a little bit with From the Depths, showing off different propulsion methods and weapon systems and what have you. But one thing I haven't really done a whole lot of so far is explaining how those things are built, or maybe going into fuller detail of how they work. So what I'd like to do is go over a number of tutorials covering all this information, because this game has quite a bit of a learning curve to it, and if I can help any of you guys out figure out how these things work, if you're getting into the game or maybe been playing it a little bit, all the better. So the one thing I'd like to talk about in this video is building engines. So to start off, I'm in the build mode, and now I'm going to go into the block inventory screen, and the part we're going to focus on is the engines tab. Now, the first block you're going to need to start with whenever you're building an engine is the engine block. Now, the engine block has a very particular orientation it needs to be facing, and that is the front facing of the engine needs to be facing in the direction you want to build off of. So, for me, I want to build off in the rearward direction. So, to do that, I'm going to have to flip the engine around so it's forward facing is facing towards the rear. Now, this can be kind of confusing because there's no real marker when you have this block which way it's facing. Right now, I have the forward facing the rear, but if you look at this arrow, it's still facing that direction, which it's been facing this entire time. If I were to rotate it one more time, you see that that arrow is still pointing in the same direction. That arrow is pointing in the direction that the forward facing of the craft is, but not the engine. After I've done that, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next part of the engine you're going to need, the next block, and that's the crankshaft. This is the block that you're going to build directly off the engine, and every other part of the engine is going to be connected to this in some way. So, well, at least the cylinder part, which is the next building block of the engine. Again, the orientation is important, so I'm going to need the front facing of the crankshaft to be facing the same orientation that the engine is. So right now, front facing is facing towards the rear. If I were to flip this around so that was reversed, you see that it's blue, saying that that is not a legal placement. So we can go ahead and keep building off. And I'm going to go ahead and build 3 out here, just to build a kind of simple, easy to engine. Now, one thing that might confuse you is you might get a green selection like this if you build off to the side of another crankshaft, but when you try and do that, you click here, it will just rotate back around. This is not a legal placement. And to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a cylinder here, which is the next building block, and this is where you get the beginnings of your powers from your cylinders. But to place a cylinder legally, all you need to do is build it off of any one of the crankshaft sides or on top of the crankshaft is a legal placement. Now, how you know whether or not you have a legal placement, if I place this cylinder not attached to anything, you'll see that it gives you a message saying not connected to engine block. Connect via crankshafts. But if we place it next to a crankshaft, we see that it now no longer gives that message and instead gives you a synopsis of what all is connected to this cylinder. So you can kind of keep track of all those things. And the same thing will happen if we place on top. But if you notice, if we place on top of this crankshaft here, although it did highlight green like that was a legal placement, it is not connected directly to the engine because it's not directly in line with the other crankshafts. So we can go ahead and delete all that. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and set up some cylinders here and build the next part of our engine. The next part you're going to want is the carburetor. Now, this is going to feed the cylinders with fuel, and this is going to be a big element of getting more power as well as how much fuel your engine consumes. And legal placement for this is very similar to legal placement with cylinders and crankshaft, except carburetors build off of the cylinders rather than the crankshaft. So again, to either side or on top is legal placement. And we know if this is legal placement because when you highlight a cylinder that you've placed it next to, it will say carburetors connected to 1, as opposed to this one, which has none, says 0. And again, on top of that is legal placement. So if we go down here, we see that it says carburetors connected 1. So let's kind of do a mirror build here. We'll put some carburetors on either side here. So every cylinder has a carburetor. And if ever you want to check what the power output of an engine is, just go ahead and go to your highlighting of the engine block itself, and it will give you a maximum power output as well as the fuel use per power usage. So this is a good way of being able to tell how fuel efficient your engine is as well as how much power it produces. Now the next part of your engine is the supercharger. Now this is going to be connected directly to the carburetors. And again, same legal placement. You can place either on top of or next to a carburetor to get the connection. And here we see superchargers connected to is 1. And if we go to the cylinder, we see superchargers connected to is 1 as well. So if you go over the cylinder, you'll get a kind of, as I said, a breakdown of what all is connected to this one cylinder. Another thing you can do is you can place a supercharger here, and this will connect to both of these superchargers. As you can see here, both of them say they have 1, and if we go over the cylinders, they also say 1. So this might be a more efficient usage of your resources, is placing a supercharger like this so that it's connected to multiple carburetors. Okay, that being said, we're going to go ahead and put down superchargers and everything. But the one thing is, we'll notice that the maximum power output has not changed at all. And you might be puzzled with this because there's an element of efficiency here. If we go to the block selector here and we look at the description, the supercharger block provides extra oxygen and fuel to the carburetor blocks, increasing the power capacity of the connected cylinders. And it's kind of like a buff to your cylinders. But the thing is, though, right now with the setup we have, we've maxed out that potential. So we could put superchargers on this thing all day long, and that power output is not going to change because the cylinders are already maxed out. So as we see, we put even more superchargers on here, and again, the power output is not changed at all. And that, as I said, is because we have already maxed out what these cylinders can provide with what we have connected. So now we need to make these a little bit better. So another thing that you can build is the engine's own fuel tank. The fuel tank provides fuel for the engine, and you'll draw from the supply directly. This will help for fuel efficiency, but it also helps because it will give you that ability to reach a more potential with the power output. And we see by attaching those fuel tanks, we immediately start getting more fuel capacity. Maximum power output. It also has changed our fuel usage as well, as you can see. So if we give it even more fuel tanks, we'll see those numbers continue to increase because we've given our engine a little bit more potential to do things. Now, before, when I was building this engine, the supercharger didn't increase the power output. But if I add one now, you'll notice that it does. So we were at 20, and this increased it by 2 points. So we see that the superchargers do have a limit of a benefit that they will give. A lot of that is dependent upon how you build your engine. So building an engine efficiently can be quite confusing. But there is one more element of building an engine that I haven't yet gone over, and that's the exhaust. Now, the exhaust you're going to connect directly to cylinders. And again, this is going to work similarly to everything else. So the fuel tanks build off of the carburetors, superchargers build off of carburetors, carburetors build off of cylinders, exhaust builds off of, the cylinders. So you can build this, again, a bunch of different ways. You can build it on top. And we see that we have that as legal placement, or we can build it next to. And just as before, when we were building the supercharger, we can put one there, and it counts as being connected to both this cylinder and this cylinder. And we can see how that has affected power. As you can see, the power output is quite high now. But the question is, what is more efficient? Having 2 exhausts like this, where we have 35 power output, or 4 exhausts, 1 per cylinder. Because we were talking about efficiency here. We notice that it's exactly the same. So we can see, resource-wise, we're probably better off having only 2 exhausts, 1 here and 1 here, because the power output is exactly the same. And that is kind of very simplistically how you would build an engine, but building the engine the most efficiently way that you can is going to take quite a lot of experience and understanding of these different components and the fact that you kind of need to balance those things. The exhaust is going to increase the potential power output of the cylinders that it's connected to, as is the carburetors and the superchargers. But with the superchargers, once you reach that kind of limit of what power you can get out of it, there's not really anything else you can do to improve that. Now, continuing on with the engine build, because there is more you can do with the engine tab, we're going to go ahead and build an electric engine here. Now, the electric engine essentially has two parts, or actually technically three parts. You have the electric engine itself, the battery, and the battery charger. Now, the electric engine is going to work just like your engine block. So you're going to build this in a particular orientation, and then you're going to build your batteries off of that. Now, I don't remember how the legal placement for so you're going to have to build off of to either side to get legal placement. And it's the same idea. Is you see here it says not connected, you know that's not legal placement. Off to the side, we see that it doesn't give you that message. Battery connected to electrical engine, and it gives you the engine ID number, so you know which engine it's connected to. You know this is a legal placement. But now that we have that, we can go ahead and place a battery here, and as long as we keep building off of other batteries, these are legal placements. So before, this was not connected, placed here, but because I've placed it next to another battery, it works just fine. So moving along, one of the last things that you have is the battery charger. Now this is going to charge up the batteries. But you'll notice that the engine isn't really doing anything right now. It should be charging these batteries up to capacity, but it's not. And the reason it's not is because we do not have a generator. So we're going to need to go back to the engine tab, and down here you have the generator. This is how you provide power to the batteries. So we're going to put that in. Immediately the engine will start up, starting to charge up those batteries. And if we highlight over a battery, we'll see what the charge is currently out of its maximum potential. And the more battery chargers we put on this thing, the faster it will charge up. And I believe it tells you in the description that how many batteries a battery charger can sustain. But there we go. We have a series of batteries and battery chargers. And they're all getting charged up. Now, there's more to this, obviously, and that comes down to the propulsion element of things. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to build a little propeller here. So I'm going to do a wooden slope down. We're going to rotate this around. Now, the reason I'm rotating this around is because I want to get this block under the water. So we're going to go roughly to the middle of the boat. You know what? I'm going to build it even right next to the center point of the boat. And I'll put a little propeller here. Now, this isn't going to make us very fast, but it's going to provide us a little bit of power. And there we go. That's placed. And we might as well also give us some rudders while we're at it so we can steer. There we go. Putting those under the water so that they will work as we want them to. Of course, we're still getting battery charge the whole time we're doing this. And we want to need to also put down a control unit, a vehicle controller. We'll make it simple. We'll just make it a ship's wheel. Put that up towards the front. Now we have a means to control everything. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily the best layout, and we have made the craft actually, we haven't really upset the balance of anything. We're still centrally balanced. But now that we have all that, we're going to go ahead and set up this electrical engine. So, right now what I'm controlling is how much of the power output this electrical engine is going to do. So current output is 100%. That means that this electrical engine will do everything to power that propeller until it runs out of juice. But I can also turn it completely off. This would make the engine be the main primary source of power rather than the electrical engine. Or I can start ramping up the electrical engine, taking some of the power usage of the total craft. So the one thing to keep in mind, though, is that battery charge is not going to last all that long if you have a lot of power demands upon it. But right now, because we have the electrical engine set up to be the entirety of the usage of power outside of just using the generator here, which we can also turn off if we want. We can turn off the generator, and then our engine doesn't have anything to do because the electric engine is going to do everything else. But we'll go ahead and keep that generator going. And now that we have that done, we're going to go ahead and exit out of the build mode. And we'll go ahead and get this thing going. Oop. So let's start propelling the craft. And right now, the electric engine is doing everything. Our gas engine isn't running any harder than it was before. But we can see the batteries are starting to lose their charge. They're really going down, and we can see that as we highlight over them. Eventually, the batteries are going to start to run more out of more and more power. And once they go dead, the gas engine will take over. But this is a pretty simple explanation of how you can use the two different engine types in the game, whether it be a battery powered engine or a gasoline powered engine or a fuel powered engine. And you also have a fuel store as well, so you can see that going down. Now we can get more fuel tanks onto this craft if we need it to be, but you can see with what power demands that we're asking of this craft, these batteries are lasting quite a while, but if I was asking a lot more of it, it would drain very quickly. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Now, if you're running completely with battery power, you're going to need to be able to dock to some kind of support craft that will be able to recharge your batteries when they run dead, because without a generator running off of a fuel-powered engine, there's no other way to repower the batteries, at least in the current build of the game. Maybe at some point in the game we'll have, solar panels or what have you. But at the moment, that's the way the game works. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.